Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Thanks, Sciinov, for inviting me to present to you on perspectives in COVID-19 serology testing. What I'll do today is
we request others
to talk to you about the COVID
Kinetics
Kinetics and the COVID-19 test, particularly how it compares to the antibody test, and I'll end with the utility. To understand serology testing, one has to realize that with exposure to COVID-19, all right, there is a 4 to 6 days incubation period before symptoms begin. But this incubation period can last anywhere from 2 to 14 days. So the viral load peaks before symptom onset. And the infectiousness or transmissibility of the disease is 1 to 2 days before symptoms and about 1 week thereafter. But there are also folks who are contagious who are pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic. For testing, we have got the viral test, which is the PCR and the antigen, and serology. For PCR, it's important to remember that there are different gene targets, different probes, and different primers. But first, we have to get the sample. There's a change in trends now from the deep-seated nasopharyngeal swab to a nasal swab or even the use of saliva. And the most abundant sample, of course, is the bronchoalveolar lavage fluid, sputum equal to nasal swab, and thereafter we entered into the PCR reaction, and after extraction, purification, reverse transcriptase, and amplification of the cDNA, there is fluorescent signal generated, and that signal, when it crosses a threshold, is called the cycle threshold, or CT. The problem with PCR is that the limit of detection is quite variously described: copies per mil, genomic copy equivalents per reaction, genomic RNA copies per mil, TCID 50 per mil, genome copies per mil, and the more recently, the net DU units per mil as well. And the other problem is that what is the cutoff cycle threshold that is significant for presence of the virus? Firstly, we know that at the level of 34 to 35, you can hardly culture any positive virus. All right. Secondly, all right, the duration and infectiousness in week 1, the CT value is usually about 26 to 28. The week 2, it's about 29 to 31, and in week 3, it's about 32 to 35. Viral load declines with time, and no viruses are cultured after 10 days, all right, in most hands. Right, here's 2 other series that shows that by day 10, you can't culture any viruses. Another problem with the PCR is that the sensitivity or the limit of detection varies quite greatly, from as low as 40 copies per mil to even 100,000 copies per mil. So that's a very wide range. So if your assay can only measure 100,000 copies per mil, and if you have 90,000 copies, it will be reported as negative. And also the LOD, as I said, is measured in copies per reaction, and also TCID 50 per mil. So it's quite confusing to see which assays compare to each other. Why is sensitivity important? Of course, right? A very sensitive assay such as the Abbott can detect about 100 copies whereas another one that's less sensitive will only be present in 1 million copies. Another reason with the PCR is that the false negative rate is estimated to be about 38%, all right, on the day of symptoms, and it drops to maybe about 20% by day 8, but thereafter it increases again. So it's not perfect, right? And if we have a PCR test, you can be pre-infectious and PCR positive in the upslope, and you could also be positive in the downslope when it is post-infectious. There are also improvements in rapid diagnostics for PCR and molecular testing. The Sapphire is quite good, but it's 45 minutes and it's quite expensive. And the Abbott ID Now, where an answer is given in as early as 5 minutes or up to 15 minutes. The other thing is the now increasingly popular is the use of the antigen test to try and replace or substitute for the PCR. And the antigen test in orange here does not have the long tail of the PCR, so improving its specificity. And this is the proof that the antigen is usually not present after 5 days. And there are rapid antigen tests which uses instruments to make it more objective, or to make it objective with an instrument, right? Both are read within 15 minutes. There are a few that are already approved, and more are now coming along stream. Now let me move to serology. The problem with serology was in the early bits of the infection, there were a lot of bad tests, and so this meta-analysis in the BMJ in July, said that existing POCT tests should not be used at all as it's bad, but others could be useful to improve the diagnosis as well as in epidemiologic surveillance. And they also mentioned, you can see that it depends on the assay. The chemiluminescent immunoassays are much better with low false negatives and false positives. And therefore, the optimism has been echoed in even an editorial in Science. Remember, though, that the serology measures antibodies against a virus. It detects immune response to current or past infections. Which epitope? Well, the nucleocapsid epitope has greater avidity and binding affinity over the spike protein. The conventional kinetics of viral serology is that IgM rises first in the first week, and then IgG follows in the second week. However, with this virus, it's slightly different, Usually, both the antibodies are produced fairly early, and the IgG in most hands is, greater than the IgM response. IgG arises early, and G is greater than M in most hands. The total antibodies, of course, will be better than the G and the M with more signal. And in a Cochrane systematic review, if we use G and M, especially after days 15 or days 21, it's fairly good. The sensitivity is over 90%, and the specificity is close to 99%. Now, we have evaluated the Roche electrochemiluminescent assay, and we are really impressed that all of these assays today have very good specificity. Here you see that it's only one false positive here. And same also on the Abbott, you find that the out of close to 1,000 people, there are very few false positives. And even against other usual contaminants like flu, dengue fever, and positive antibodies for hepatitis, syphilis, anti-nuclear antibodies are all very low in false positivity. The timing of the tests in serology is vital, right? As we said, the serologic response is early. So even in days, in the first week after the first positive PCR, right? In the Roche assay, we find that 48% of them are already positive. And this is also shown in other papers, right? They have 46% for the first week and 50% for the third day in another paper. For the Abbott assay, it's the same thing, all right? We get about 45, 46% positive in the first week. And if we lower the cutoff index from 1.4 to 1.55, which is the 99th percentile, you find that you can improve the sensitivity to about 56%. And this has been shown by others too, that the first 3 days, they got it at 47%. And in this series here, right, almost all of them in day up to 11 were all quite high in the cutoff index. The best thing about all this automated serology is that we can do a large number of tests, right? 250 samples within the hour. And so if you need to do large numbers of samples, especially in massive screening, then this would be a good modality, whereas the PCR would be hard put to do. Another thing is that it has been shown to be useful as an adjunct for diagnosis. This is a family cluster of cases that were identified. All was PCR negative, and they had positive IgM titers, right, in the family members. And also, if PCR was used alone, whereas PCR plus the IgM ELISA, right, you get much better positive identification. So if we look at the time when PCR is most likely to be positive and when the antibody starts to get positive, all right, you see that there's an overlap, right, in by the end of week 2, all right, and to the beginning of week 4, that both would be positive, right, giving us useful adjunctive information when we use 2 tests. 2 tests provide more information, right? This is a study from Harvard where they did daily PCR testing together with serology, and you can see that there is incremental information when both are employed. And this is also shown here when the RNA tests and the antibody tests were used together. There's much better positivity reflected. So if we think that the antibody test has a sensitivity of 50% and a specificity of 99%, and say the PCR has a sensitivity of 70% and a specificity of 99.5%, in a low prevalence situation of say 0.1% with disease, all right, both would perform rather poorly, less than 10%. But if we employ them sequentially, right, that is in an orthogonal fashion, either PCR first or antibody first, followed by testing in all those positive cases, then the positive predictive value improves to 78%. And this can only increase, all right, as the prevalence increases. So when you are doing mass testing, right, the prevalence may be anywhere from 1 to less than 0.1%. So therefore, 2 tests will be better than 1. We now move to the rapid serology tests. Right, today, the serology tests have improved. Right, it's all now better than 99% specificity, and the sensitivity, of course, depends on days when the tests are performed. right? And we have finished, trying out the Roche rapid antibody assay, and the answers are given in a 10 to 15 minute time frame. It's like a pregnancy test, and you find that the concordance with the uh, uh, Roche POCT with the COBAS total antibody assay, all right, it's pretty good even for the first week, and week 2 and week 3, complete agreement. And of course, in the control subjects, right, there's no false positive. Right? Similarly, the Abbott also is the same, and you find that the first week, right, the POCT is also quite good with very few false positive cases. But the real advance, I think, will come when we do both the high throughput antigen test, chemiluminescence assay, as well as the antibody assay, 2 tests on the same sample in the same instrument, and rapid testing. That would be the best combination I foresee. And this antigen test should be coming out in the next several weeks. So what have I done today? I've told you about the kinetics of SARS-CoV-2 to understand how testing should be optimized. Of the tests, we have both viral tests as well as antibody tests. And the utility of both tests is really much improved compared to one. Thank you very much. I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Choon. Any questions for Dr. Choon, or you can ask now?